Hi there! Welcome to the very first episode of Kitchen Witchin. I'm your host, and I'm coming to you from the ugliest kitchen in America. As you can see, it's at my house. I just happen to live here, so it's biased opinion. So today's episode, we're going to start off with something a little bit traditional, which, as you can see, is not something I'm necessarily familiar with, but also easy and delicious. And a little bit impressive if you ever have company over and you decide, hey, I don't know what to make. I got you covered. So first, what we're going to start off today is meatloaf. Yes, I know everybody's probably like, oh my god, meatloaf, seriously? No, trust me, it's good. It's a good recipe. Just stick with me here for a little bit. Yes, we're making a very easy, very quick, very tasty meatloaf recipe. Alright, let's get started. First, we need to remember to preheat our ovens. Now we're looking at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. Unfortunately, I forgot to get my oven fixed before filming this today, so I have to use my toaster oven. Normally what I do is, if I have to convert something from a regular oven over to a toaster oven, I add about 50 degrees and about 10 to 15 minutes to the time. So if you're using an oven, go ahead and preheat at 400. And if you're using a toaster oven, we're going to go ahead and preheat for about 450. Alright. Alright, now we can start cooking. So, of course, the star of the show is always going to be the hamburger. This is a 93-7 mix of lean and fat. You can do higher than that, you can do lower than that, whatever you're comfortable with, and whatever you can find. Go ahead and toss that in. And then we're going to add 2 eggs, which I've already shelled because this is not my first time doing this. I messed up a bunch. Shouldn't have told you that. Alright. And then we're going to move on to the Worcestershire sauce, which is a thing that nobody knows how to pronounce confidently. So if you're one of literally everyone who doesn't know how to pronounce it confidently, don't worry, we all are like that. Basically, if you can get the first one, the Worcester of the Worcestershire, or Worcestershire, or Worcestershire, yeah, we all know what you're talking about. It's fine. Don't stress about it. Alright, so make sure you mix this up well, because it is a strange concoction that, believe it or not, early in their Indian colonialism, decided that they wanted to make a home version of Indian food, and they came up with this. I don't know, massive mistake turned into a 200-year-long industry. Go figure. Alright, so we're going to do about a teaspoon of this. And then we're going to have about half a cup of minced onions. Make sure these are minced up pretty fine so they get mixed in and they aren't sticking out in your meatloaf. Nobody wants that. It's not attractive. Okay. And then we have about another teaspoon, well, about a half teaspoon of salt. About the same with pepper, black pepper. Although I do tend to go a little crazy with black pepper, so if it's too much for you, that's fine. Make it how you like it. And then we've got thyme, sage, oregano, and basil. Now I do grow my own vegetables and herbs sometimes, so I do dry my own. So I do have dry thyme, dry sage. But for something like this, I like it to be a little bit more ground up, especially the thyme, because if you don't cook it enough, it hurts your teeth because it's got little stems. Okay. So for now, I'm going to use store-bought ground sage and ground thyme, but we'll come back to those for the next one. And it's about another half a teaspoon. And unfortunately, I forgot to buy basil, and I don't have any dried basil at the moment. So I picked some fresh basil that I'm going to toss in. I washed it, chopped it up, and so that's gonna work. But I'm putting about a teaspoon of that because since it's not dry, the flavors aren't quite as concentrated. So it's going to be you're going to need about double the amount to match up with the flavor that you're going to get from dried. All right. And I think that's about it. The last ingredient is always the panko. The rest of this you can kind of just throw in any order. It's not that big of a deal. Meatloaf is a very forgiving recipe. You don't have to be exact with a lot of stuff, you know, but the panko is really one of the most important parts of it. Just because, you know, you want to get that right texture. What we're going to do is go ahead and stir it up. I like to use my hands because I think that it does a more thorough job. And you're going to see that a lot of this show. But if you want to use a spoon too, that's fine. Whatever you're comfortable with. Make sure you mix it up really well. Now we go ahead and put in the panko. It's going to be about 2/3 of a cup. I can find it because I didn't think to put it out ahead of time. Well, that's 1/3 of a cup. All right. And the 2/3 cup designation is just sort of an average, you know. If you make it yourself, you know, depending on the size of the eggs, the fat content of the meat, you know, different things. If you decide to put more dry, more wet, you know. The 2/3 is just sort of where you want to start out at. And usually I end up putting in a little bit more just to make it a little bit more firm. But that's just how I like it. And if you want it a little softer, that's fine. You can put a little bit less than the 2/3 of a cup. Just be careful because, you know, you don't want it falling down through and mushing out everywhere. Boy, I wish there was a more eloquent phrase I could have thought of for that. Ah, that's the fun of being on camera. All right, we're going to put a little bit more in. And if you're a beginner, you know, eventually that sixth sense will come when you start getting used to what you're doing and you make a recipe a few times, you know. And normally I kind of just use recipes as a starter, as it is, and then I kind of tailor it to how I like it. Make it the way I like. And you can do that too. So think of these as just building blocks to get your to be able to figure out a recipe, and then from there on you can go do what you want. Have fun. Alright, so we are all mixed up. Super easy. Now what we're going to do is just form it into a loaf. Make sure any large pieces of, well, basil or onion are sticking in so they don't get overcooked. That is not fun to bite into. All right. Might take a little fiddling to get to. All right. That is a very nice, very raw piece of the hamburger. All right. So what we're gonna do is, well, normally I would suggest using a roaster pan, a double layer roasting pan with slits in it, so that any fat that comes out can drain down. So it's not still on the meat, because the underside can get very soggy. Like we like to say in pie making, you can get soggy bottom, and nobody wants soggy bottom. I suppose also you could say that in life, because that's pretty gross. Anyway, since I am using my toaster oven, I sort of just MacGyvered together two of my inserts for the toaster oven. So hopefully this should hold it up and drain all the fat. Sometimes what I also like to do is, if I'm in a hurry and I'm just eating it myself, I will grab a small casserole dish and just flatten it out like I'm making a pie crust. You know, just a very, very thick, very meaty pie crust. Yeah. Just flatten it out. It looks like a big meat slab. Sometimes I call it a meat slab. Nobody ever wants to eat it, which means I get all the leftovers. It will reduce the cooking time. It'll look ugly. And also, you'll have a lot of fat built up on the top. So, you know, if you're making this for other people and you actually want them to enjoy it and not be grossed out, go with the loaf, because most of it'll sort of drain off and down into the bottom pan. So we don't have to worry about that. Alright, so that should be nice and heated up. We're going to toss this in. And let it go. Now, as I said, if we're cooking this with the stove, the cooking time is going to be about a half an hour. But since we're doing it with the toaster oven, we're going to have to bump that up to about 40 to 45 minutes. My poor old oven. So sad. Alright, and then we are good to go, and I'm going to go wash my hands because I'm covered with meat juice. So we'll be back in about 45 minutes to check on the progress. Welcome back. I almost forgot something last time. So we're about, well, I'm about 30 minutes in. You should be about 20 minutes in, we'll say. I almost forgot about making the glaze. I know that's the thing that a lot of people like. Personally, I'm not crazy about it, but we're going to do it anyway today. Since, hey, why not? We're making a traditional meatloaf. Let's make a traditional meatloaf. So we're going to pull our meatloaves out, hopefully very carefully. Now it's starting to get a nice brown on it. The next 10 minutes we'll finish cooking the inside and let the glaze set. So what we're going to start with is an 8-ounce can of tomato paste, which I've already scooped out. And then we're going to be adding sugar or sweetener and vinegar. It's essentially a sturdier version of ketchup, basically. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Packed brown sugar. And 1 of apple cider vinegar. I prefer apple cider vinegar. I think it has a better flavor. But you can use a different vinegar if you like, if you prefer the taste. Okay. I'm going to give it a nice stir. Really could have picked a better thing to put this in. That's about it. You can add different things if you want. When I was doing the research for the glaze ingredients, I ran across all sorts of things, including molasses and rice wine and herbs and minced garlic. But you can also just keep it a bit simple. Now what I like to do is if it's a little bit runny, you can add a little extra brown sugar. To be perfectly honest, the only food glazes I do are Christmas hams, and I usually stick a bunch of brown sugar in there so that it keeps a good bit of shape. Now the tomato paste will help with that. So basically just glob it on. And then you can use a spoon or a barbecue brush if you want. Just give it a nice once over. Alright. And as you can see, mine is a little bit browner than I meant it to be. Yours should not be quite this brown. And the glaze will help keep it from browning a little bit more after that. So what we're going to do is stick it back in the oven, same temperature, let it finish cooking for the last 10 to 15 minutes. Turn it up just a little bit because, like I said, it is getting a little brown. Alright, and you want to make sure that cooks to an internal temperature of 160 degrees just to make sure everything's safe to eat. Alright, so we're going to set it for about 10 minutes and we'll give it a check. Alright, I'll see you then. Welcome back. By now our meatloaf should be nice and cooked. The glaze should be nice and set. So let's pull that out and then start on our next dish. Looks pretty good. I'm going to set this aside for a little bit and leave the oven on. You're going to want to keep it set at 400 degrees if you're using an oven. If you're like me, of course, stuck using a toaster oven, you don't want to bump it up a little bit. So, alright, let that go, and we're going to move on to our fancy potatoes. Now I call them that because I'm not good at making up names for things. This took me 6 years, just trust me on that. So what this is sort of a combination of potatoes au gratin and scallop potatoes. Personally, I don't really like either that much. But I do like this recipe. I think combining the best parts of both of those makes some pretty good potatoes. So basically, when we talk about potatoes au gratin designates something that is crusty and put under the put under the broiler to produce a nice heavy crust. Usually, it has breadcrumbs on it to help with the crustiness, and generally, it is only with cheese and not with the cream sauce. And that cheese is usually Gruyere. Now, you can use Gruyere for this if you want, or you can use cheddar, you can use Gouda, kind of whatever you feel like. I like to use cheddar. I think much like the onions and russet potatoes, it's a nice middle of the road flavor to have on hand, so you don't have to go out and try looking around your area for Gruyere. What scallop potatoes generally means is that it's in a milk or a cream sauce with no cheese. So it gets a little soggy. So you have either too hard or too soggy. I'm not a fan of either. So this is a little bit soggy, a little bit hard, lots of cheese, lots of milk, good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that. So what you want to do after you've got your oven preheating, obviously, is you're going to want to come over to the stovetop. So first we're going to put in 3 tablespoons of butter. And we're going to start to melt that on medium-high heat. Now you can use unsalted butter if you'd like. You could use salted butter. You can use margarine. I probably wouldn't use margarine. Whichever you feel like using, whichever you have in the house is fine. Okay. Now we're going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Or more. I usually put in more. Oops. Nope, I put in more there. Okay. And then we're going to add 3 tablespoons, the same amount as the butter. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of flour. Alright, and give that a good mix. Now essentially what we're making here is called a roux, R-O-U-X. And if you overcook it, you're going to rue the day. Now a roux is just basically flour and butter. It's used as a soup base, based in French cooking, based in Cajun cooking, and that looks pretty good. Now with a roux, the longer you cook it, the darker the flavor will, or the darker the color will get, and the darker the flavor will get. So it'll add a little bit of extra flavor to whatever you're putting it in. And also, the smell will become stronger. That's how you know. If you can't tell from the color, you can tell from the smell. All right, that looks pretty good. So what we're going to do is going to lower this down a little bit. And we're going to slowly add in 2 cups of milk. Keep adding and stirring so all that's mixed. Okay. And then we're going to add, there we go, a ½ teaspoon of thyme. Now, like I said, when I was making the meatloaf, I do dry my own herbs. So you can use ground thyme, dry thyme, fresh thyme, whichever you like, whichever is easier for you. Also, we're going to be putting in 3 cloves of garlic. Now, my family is very Italian, so 3 cloves of garlic usually translates into 5 or 6 cloves of garlic. I wrote it down as 3 to 5, so you can have a little bit of leeway there. But instead of chopping them up, what we're going to do is we're going to just chop them in half. We're going to squish them a little bit and leave it in with the milk mixture, the sauce mixture, to cook down, to flavor it up, and then we're going to pull them out at the end of it. So first we have to skin them. In order to skin garlic, what you want to do is take a knife, hold it parallel with the blade away from you, of course, set it down on the garlic, and hit it with the heel of your hand. Now it should split the skin, which should make it easy to peel the skin off. And in this case, it does a good job of cutting up the garlic for us. So since this is a pretty big clove, I'm just going to give it another couple of cuts. That's pretty good. That should go in good how it is. Another small one. From the end off. And our third one. Give it another hit because it's being a pain. There we go. And should be end off that one too. Now this one is a little big also, so we're going to give that a nice little slice. Alright, and our garlic is ready to go in. If I can grab it. There we go. Alright. And we're going to keep mixing this down. For a couple of minutes. We want to cook some of the water out, get it to thicken up some. And now, when you're cooking with milk over an open flame, it can get temperamental, so make sure that you keep stirring and keep scraping the bottom so nothing starts to stick. In the meantime, we can move to our dish. Now I'm using, normally I would use a larger casserole dish, but as we're a little bit tight on space, I switched to a pie plate. So what we want to do, push it out of the way, is usually I just take a stick of unsalted butter, or a stick of salted butter, I don't know. Sticks make it easy because all you have to do is just grab it like that, and just rub it all over the whatever cooking area is going to be. Doesn't have to be meat, and it won't. And I can go back in the fridge, and then just gently smooth over any open spaces in the butter to keep things from sticking. When we get to the cake episodes, we're going to take this a step further and flour it, which is a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you get it in the corners, because that is always a trouble area. Alright. Let's check on our milk. For the sake of expediency for the show, we're going to just assume that I get everything up. Alright, now we're up to the cheese. Now we want to put in 2.5, oh well, let's turn the temperature off first so we don't scorch anything. And we're going to put 2.5 cups of cheese in. Shredded cheese will melt faster. Go ahead and add that. Make sure that is nicely melted in. And looking very lovely. We can start assembling. So we're going to take 2 large russet potatoes. You can use Yukon Gold, you can use red if you want. From what I understand, red is a little bit more traditional for a gratin. People like to use Yukon Gold and the scallop. So nice middle of the road russet. Now we're going to chop these up. Skin, wash, chop them up into about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch slices. layering on the bottom of our greased pan. I'm going to put about half of them down in the first layer. FYI, this is very similar to the way I make apple pie. And we'll get to that in a different episode. Some of these are a little thin. Kind of put them together. There we go. That looks good. All right, we're going to put about a quarter of a cup. I'm sorry, about a quarter of our sauce in. It doesn't have to be pretty, just spread it around. Make sure it's about even. Then we're going to add all of our onions. So this is about a half of a cup of chopped sweet onion. It doesn't need to be minced as fine as you did with the meatloaf. In fact, if you want, you can just put the whole slices on over the potatoes, but I chose to cut it up this time. So we're going to just add that in. All of the half cup over the first layer of potatoes. Try to keep it even. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to layer it with the rest of our potato slices, just like we did with the first one. And the last few, we're just going to fill in some of the gaps here. Make it as even as we can. There we go. Now, take the rest of our lovely sauce and just put on top. Okay. Try to get everything covered. If not, it's okay. We're going to put a little bit of foil over top. As you can see, I've rushed in cutting up my cheese and I still have a few chunks in here. Do as I say, not as I do. There we go. Okay. And now, what you can do if you like is add some breadcrumbs to the top. Or not. It's up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some panko to about half of it so we can see what it looks like with the breadcrumbs and see what it looks like without. Okay. And that is ready. First we have to cover it with foil. Since the cream sauce, we don't want anything overcooking. There we go. dinner because I have very little space at the moment. Alright, now we'll go ahead and put this in and let it cook. If you're making it with our friend the oven, you're going to want to leave it in for about an hour and a half, 90 minutes. With the toaster oven, I'm probably going to leave it in about an hour and 45 minutes just to give it a little bit of time. So we will pick back up there. Alright, we're back. It's been about an hour and a half. So our potatoes should be done. So let's just give them a check here. Let's start this way. Okay. Now, if you want to double check to make sure everything's cooked through, just grab a steak knife and slide it in. Check the doneness of the potatoes. They should be al dente, let's say. And this looks good. Unfortunately, my breadcrumbs didn't brown as much as I'd hoped. But that's okay. You know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's life. But that smells really good and looks very done. So we just made a great dinner, actually. We have our meatloaf, we have our potatoes, we're ready to go. And I guess that about does it for this episode. The first episode. And thank you for coming with me on this kind of strange journey today. I hope you'll come back next time. And good eating. Well, this has been the Kitchen Witch, Susie Bianco, your lovely host, coming to you from the ugliest kitchen in America, of course. And I'll see you next time.